Welcome to the Financial Freedom Podcast, where we interview remarkable people and share strategies for mastering money and living a meaningful life. With your host, Grant Sabatier, creator of Millennial Money and author of Financial Freedom, a proven path to all the money you will ever need.
This episode is sponsored by ShipStation. If you have an online business, you can save a ton of money shipping with ShipStation. I use it to ship out copies of my book and totally recommend it. It helps me print shipping labels quickly and save money on my shipping cost. No matter where you're selling, Amazon, Etsy, or your own website, ShipStation brings all of your orders into one simple interface and works with all the major carriers, including USPS, FedEx, UPS, and even international carriers. And right now, Financial Freedom listeners can try ShipStation free for 60 days when you use the offer code FREEDOM. Make sure your business is ready to meet the demands of a massive online shopping season. Get started at ShipStation.com today. Click on the microphone at the top of the homepage and type in FREEDOM. That's ShipStation.com, then enter the offer code FREEDOM. ShipStation.com. Make ship happen. Welcome to this episode of the Financial Freedom Podcast. It's a Monday morning, September 2020. I'm going to be recording this one solo as I reflect on the past 5 years since reaching financial independence. So for those of you who know my story, I'm not going to go deep into it, but it's pretty simple. At the age of 24, I had to move back home with my parents. I had $2.26 to my name and had to completely reset my life and reevaluate what I wanted to do. And I built an in-demand skill set, running Google AdWords campaigns and building websites. And it took me about 5 years, 3 months, and a few days since leaving my parents' house at the age of 24 to become financially independent. And since that time, now I'm 35 years old, so much has happened. I launched millennialmoney.com. I wrote a book. I've traveled all over the country talking to people of all ages about money and finance. I've had the opportunity to engage in now thousands of conversations with people about money and what it means to them in their life. And woke up this morning quite reflective. I often reflect on my life kind of in 5-year increments, and Financial Freedom, my book, is really about that journey from 25 to 30 and what I went through. And now 5 years has passed since reaching financial independence, and so much has changed in my life, not only my relationship with money, but I've moved 5 different times in the past 5 years. I've done so many projects. I've met so many people, and my relationship with money, as well as my relationship with myself, has changed immensely during that time period. So it's a Monday morning, and I wanted to reflect on that journey because Monday mornings just used to be so stressful for me. Really, throughout my entire 20s, I would dread Monday mornings, the slog to work. My first job, I had about a 2-hour commute from the south side of Chicago to the northern suburbs. And then I got a different job, and my commute shortened to about 30 minutes. And then that was even too long for me, so I moved 5 blocks from my office. And even living so close, it certainly made it easier, but it didn't take away the Monday dread that I often felt about the week and the stress of the job and money. And, I've always talked about how money only matters if it helps you live a life you love. And I can say categorically, I really wasn't enjoying my life in my late 20s, even though I'd built a business and a successful business and had a lot of opportunities. My relationship with money was really messed up and really backward. And, I've talked a lot about how so much of us have the freedom that we crave. We just don't recognize it or take advantage of it. And I was the perfect example of that. Even after I'd saved up $100,000 and $200,000 and $300,000, I was more stressed about money than ever before because I hadn't reached financial independence. And in a lot of cases, financial independence became money addiction in another form to me. And money was all I thought about and all I worked towards. And all of you know that I hustled really, really hard for a number of years to reach financial independence at the age of 30. And since then, I've just learned an immense more about money and life and what it means to live a good life. And I thought that the things that I thought would make me happy really ended up not making me a lot happier. And I wanted to talk a little bit about where I'm at now and what I'm thinking about now. So 2 months ago, I moved from New York City to Ohio and left a really bustling city for a much smaller city and a completely change in the quality of life and the opportunities. So a lot has really come full circle for me in the past 5 years. At 30, when I'd reached financial independence, I really didn't take a whole lot of time to celebrate it. It did bring me to tears when I checked my net worth, as crazy and weird as that sounds. But shortly after that, I bought a car and then really just kept back on the grind. So I'd built a successful business. I had a number of side hustles, and I just kept grinding. I really didn't take advantage of the freedom that I had. I was so wound up with just the energy and the stress that was required to get me to where I wanted to go, to reach financial independence, that it wasn't like something like I reached financial independence to become a millionaire and then all the stress dissipated. It took me, really now looking back, a number of years to unwind from that grind. And this is one of the things about life. Often the skills that we acquire in our life to get to where we want to go, those same skills not only might not be useful, but in a lot of aspects, they could be even damaging as you work to get to that next threshold. So, I've talked a lot about what it means to chase money and go after money and always want more and never feel like you have enough. And I think that's something, especially in our culture, that is so rooted in who so many of us are, and it comes with a lot of stress. And so that's why you see, a lot of successful business people, when they get to the end of their life, reflecting back on whether they made the most of it and whether the trade-offs were worth it. And, for everyone listening to this podcast, I know it's not a yes or no answer, or nothing is ever super clear or super clean. And so, whether you want to be an entrepreneur or you don't, whether you love your business or you don't, that's completely up to you. I just encourage you to be honest with yourself about what you like about what you're doing and what you don't like about what you're doing, and realize that everything comes down to a trade-off. And the things that you love to do right now, you might not love to do them in 5 years, because we're always changing. And so the more that we're able to check in with ourselves, and I do this now through meditation and just writing, just checking in with myself about, am I still enjoying doing what I'm doing, and is this what I want my life to look like? And I've talked a little bit about this, but the idea of freedom has also changed a lot for me over the past 5 years since reaching financial independence. And I used to think that freedom meant having all the choices in the world and being able to do whatever I wanted to do and buy whatever I wanted to buy and create whatever I wanted to create and wake up in the morning and just literally do anything. And I feel very grateful that I do have that freedom, but it wasn't until recently that I realized that my definition of freedom had changed, and it really wasn't about having all of the choices in the world. It was about having the opportunity to do the things that I love. And those are two very different things, and especially within the pandemic, as so many of us are trapped in our homes and not able to travel or not able to take those international trips that we might like taking, spending so much time at home with the people that we live with and hopefully the people that we love and ourselves, really, at least for me, is stripped back to the kind of the core of, who I am and what my life is. And instead of thinking about, freedom in the future or even freedom in the past, I just asked myself, am I free in this moment? And I, like a lot of people, spend time, and still do a little less, but I still, worry about the future. And, now I'm worrying about, my parents as they're getting older. I'm worrying about some of my friends who have illnesses right now and are battling illnesses. I worry about some of the financial stress that I know friends are going through. But I try not to get too far ahead of myself in my own life and worry too much about what clearly is an increasingly uncertain future. So, you just read the news today, and, my heart goes out to anyone who's on the West Coast listening to this in Oregon or California, and the wildfires out there are just so crazy. I have a lot of friends who are dealing with that. And, there's so many reasons that that's happening, but clearly one of them is, climate change and just the acceleration of climate change. And I do think it's going to get harder to live in this country and harder to live in this world as all of these forces just increase, whether it's climate change or the economy or, overpopulation. So I think the next, 5 years are going to be more intense in a lot of ways from an external stressor standpoint in our lives. And that's why making sure that not only you enjoy every moment, but asking yourself, are you free in this moment? Because freedom really is freedom of mind. Like so many of us, we are creating our own reality. Certainly the world is happening both within us and outside of us, but, thinking about when you are stressed about money, why are you stressed about money? Thinking about in other areas of your life when you're stressed, why are you stressed? Perhaps is there another way that you can see the world or your relationship in it that could relieve some of that stress? That's one of the things that I often think about. And so not getting too far ahead of ourselves as well. So I encourage you to ask whether you're free in this moment, as opposed to will you be free in 5, 10, 15, 20 years when you have $2 million saved or $1 million saved or $10 million saved. Being free in this moment ends up being so much more urgent and so much more important than anything in the future that is so uncertain. I also think finding that balance between not only when we spend and when we save money, but realizing that, our relationship with money, as I've talked about, is going to change. And so some of the things that I really love now, I didn't love in the past. And I know that some things that I'll love in the future, I don't love now. And so trying to be honest with myself, being more mindful about that. Because even 5 years ago, looking back at the age of 30 and reaching financial independence, over time, my stress around money started to dissipate somewhat, but I was pretty unhappy still. And it took many years of unraveling and also realizing, as I mentioned, that so much of what I was seeking was already in front of me. And so there's been some big changes in my life, and I wrote about this in my newsletter a couple of weeks ago, where I'm moving from New York City to Ohio for the first time since I left, for college, and just being at my parents' house for a brief time. I haven't lived in a house. I've always lived in apartments in Chicago and then New York. And so now living in a house with a garage, and bought my first grill at the age of 35 and hung up a hammock between two trees. And, I realized that it wasn't even freedom in terms of being able to do anything at any moment. What I was really seeking was the freedom to do the things I love, which became easier for me to see as I've gotten older. So I really enjoy writing. I really enjoy reading. I really enjoy simply being able to wake up and read a book on a topic that I'm interested in. I also like sometimes waking up and just being able to watch a documentary or a television show. But I don't need all of the opportunities and all of the choices in the world. I just need the time and the space to do the things I love and to continue to grow. And that's one of those things where, reflecting back now on the past 5 years, my money has grown pretty considerably since reaching financial independence. And so all of that compounding potential that I invested in, and all the, 80+% of my income that I was saving in 2011, 2012, 2013, I've been grateful that the market has grown pretty considerably since that time, and my money continues to grow and compound. And that sort of hypothesis that trying to invest and save as much as you can, as early as you can, has paid off for me and made all of the what felt like sacrifices at the time worth it now. And I like to think about investing, invest in the you that you've yet to become, because you don't know who that's going to be. You might wake up tomorrow and not like your job, even if you love it today. Or you might wake up tomorrow not as healthy or as energetic as you are today. And preparing for that uncertainty with money gives you more options and obviously more security and more freedom in that sense. But, I really think that's just a starting point, and that one of the blessings and the curses of becoming financially independent is that when you're not worried or as worried about money or thinking about money as much, you have a lot more time to think and a lot more time to reflect and a lot more time to kind of confront those things that were perhaps holding you back, or just spend time with yourself. And honestly, that drove me a little crazy for about 2 or 3 years, just having that freedom and no longer having that goal, that intense goal of reaching financial independence, really took my mind down some crazy paths, and I was forced to deal with a lot of the anxieties that I hadn't dealt with in my 20s. And I experienced a lot of panic attacks in my 20s and had to kind of figure out what that meant and go through that process of unwinding that and figuring out what I really do enjoy, and then also letting go of so many of those things that I thought that I was. And so that's kind of the blessing and the curse, because when you have a lot of time, you have a lot of time to think. And when you have a lot of time to think, your mind can go a lot of different places. But you also have more time to take bigger risks and create and grow. And, how I measure my life has changed immensely throughout my life. And so, of course, growing up and getting through high school and college, it was get good grades and do well and make my parents proud. And my mid-20s or early 20s, it was get a job and start making some money and get some independence. And then my late 20s, it was reach financial independence. And in my early 30s to mid-30s, it was try to chill out a little bit and focus more on your health and quality of life. And now, moving forward, it's how can I continue to grow? And, I think it's very important for us to not only define success for ourselves, but to set our own measure stick for our life. Because, when you're alone at your computer or you're alone in your room or taking a walk, there's no one over your shoulder kind of looking at what you're doing and keeping an eye on you. And all of us are really required to figure out what success means and what does peace mean. And some of these mindset shifts in my own life where I've talked about how, success isn't about money, it's about peace. That was one of the first revelations for me, that big shift where I realized why I was craving and seeking the money was because I wanted peace in my life. I didn't want to have to worry so much about money, which is something my parents and, I worried about really growing up. And so I just wanted that peace in my life. And then the next thing, I really thought that, I wanted happiness. I just wanted to be happy, and everyone deserves a happy life. Everyone deserves the life that they love. And, I started getting a lot happier once I could focus less on the money and start doing cool projects like writing, on Millennial Money and creating the blog and creating the podcast and meeting people who shared a similar worldview to me and pursuing other ideas that I was interested in. I've been increasingly happy, I would say, the past 5 years since reaching financial independence. But a lot of that happiness has come through the relationships that I've built with readers and listeners and creators and other people who see the world like I see it and who also inspire me. And it's also come from letting go of a lot of those things that I wanted to accomplish or thought that I wanted to accomplish, or things I wanted to be that in reality I don't want to be. And I've talked about this before, how, Vicki Robin, my teacher and the great friend and author of Your Money or Your Life, one of the things she encouraged me to think about was that freedom only exists within limits. And I've talked about this a little bit on the podcast, but that was a huge moment in my life when I realized that there are certain limits to my life that exist. Of course, the limit of, when we're going to die, and we don't know when that's going to happen, but, we're all getting older and we're all dying in every moment, very slowly, hopefully. But there are limits to our life. And, as you get older, you start to realize that there are fewer and fewer things that you probably can accomplish, and that things take more time than you would have expected them to take. And so the more that I've thought about the limits in my own life and recognized them, the more I've been able to let go of some of those early ideas of, wanting to have, a 500-person company or a $1 billion business, or some of these things that you kind of get trapped up in our culture. And so once I put those limits and realized that I wasn't willing to make those trade-offs, and that I'll probably just run out of time in that sense, and also focusing on quality of life above all else. So as I mentioned, I've certainly gotten happier over the past 5 years, but it's been from doing the work that I'd been putting off on myself, spending more time with people that I love, and then letting go of all those things that I thought that I wanted, which really in reality didn't make my life richer. And then now coming to a point where maybe I've gone full circle, or maybe I never was here from the beginning, just realizing that so many of the most beautiful things were already right in front of me. And so I get an immense amount of joy just using the grill and making food. And it's so simple and so basic. And I'm sure some of you will probably laugh at this, but I've never had a grill, and it's just awesome. I love it. Same thing with my hammock. I just like hanging out in the backyard, reading books or reading the paper or listening to music, just sitting in that hammock looking up at the trees. It's very peaceful for me. And those are those moments when I realized that, this is what I was working for. And I'm sure I could have had a hammock in a yard in Chicago when I was, completely broke and had that joy. But I was always so stressed out, so stressed out about money. And I was talking to my wife the other day about how, we were looking at some pictures from a trip we'd taken about 6 years ago to Italy. And, I just looked so stressed out in the pictures. And I told her, I said, hey, she's like, that was such a great trip. And I was like, yeah, it was a great trip. But what I remember is being stressed out the whole time. And I was stressed out 6 years ago at a time when I was already almost a millionaire. I had a successful business, but I was so wound up thinking about my clients and thinking about money and chasing money that I just didn't enjoy this incredible trip now. And I look back on that with quite a bit of regret. But and now I really want to go back to Italy and have another go at it and, not be as stressed out. So I kind of realized how much I'd been missing in my life, of my own doing, because I already had all of that freedom, and I just was improperly wired at that point. And so now the simple things like sitting in the hammock or walking my dog or, having a garage and having a yard, or being able to, like this morning, just sit out for an hour and a half and have a cup of coffee and read the paper on my front porch. Those are the things that I really love to do the most. And I feel very grateful that I can do them, and I feel a lot of peace. And, another thing is, I often ask myself, instead of, how happy was I today, which is, we're often, as we're going to bed or, as we're kind of reflecting on our day or on our week or on our month, it's, we often ask ourselves, and I even wrote about this in the book, how happy did this make me? What was it worth it? And this idea of happiness has really kind of blossomed into a different idea for me, where I no longer ask, how happy did this make me? And instead I ask, did this make me feel alive? And that subtle shift in just the question that I ask myself and the mindset really has changed my life in a lot of ways, because I used to worry, and I meet people, sometimes, on video chats or, over email or on the book tour. I meet people who, they're stressed out or worried that they're not enjoying every moment. I had this conversation with one reader once and sat down with him, and he's like, Grant, I'm really stressed out that I feel like I'm just not making the most of my moments. Like, I'm trying to be present. I'm trying to be there and trying to, make the most of the time I have with my family. And I'm worried that I'm not doing that. And so the worry of not being present, the worry of not being happy enough, often it's in holding on so tightly to that, or holding on so tightly to expectations that we think we have, or holding on really tightly to a feeling that we had in the past that we're trying to recapture, or holding on to an expectation of a way that we expect ourselves to feel. And then when we don't feel that, not only are we let down, we're like double let down, and we feel guilt, wondering why something that used to make us happy or made us happy at one point in the future no longer does, or something that we thought would make us happy no longer does. And so to me, it's really the freedom that I was seeking was within me, and it wasn't about the happiness. It was about, did I feel alive? we're not all going to have great days. I don't have great days every day. Some days I'm just stressed for no reason, or my anxiety creeps up, or I irrationally worry about money or even the stock market. I mean, sometimes I'll check the market and freak out as my portfolio is way down. And that's something, of course, I've written a ton about and think a ton about. And, I'll still fall prey to those emotions because we're all human. So it's not about being happy all the time for me. It's, do I feel alive? Am I embracing this full experience of what it means to be human? And then the final piece, is instead of thinking about happiness and thinking about money, and even if I feel at peace, one of the things I realized is that I'm happiest when I'm growing, and I'm most alive when I'm growing. And in order to grow, you have to take risks. You have to mix things up. You have to do something where even when you analyze it intensely, you're very unsure of the outcome. And so I often like to mix things up in my life. And I was talking with a reader not too long ago who was making, over $150,000 and had $500,000 saved. And, this guy was in a really great financial position, but, I recognized some of myself in him, and he was still kind of stressed about money. And he's just like, Grant, I feel stuck. And, what should I do? And, I thought about it for a second and I just told him, I said, well, if you feel stuck, then you are stuck. That your body, your mind, your intuition is telling you exactly what's going on. And this is one of those things where it was so obvious. He felt stuck. And so, he asked me, how can I get unstuck? And it's like, well, the only way to get unstuck is to unstick yourself. And what that means is if you feel stuck in a job or in a certain career, the only way to mix that up is to leave that job or leave that career or make some big shift in that job or career, or you're still going to feel stuck. And I think so many of us in life, we often get these feelings or these intuitions, and we're naturally taught to repress them. We're naturally taught to put them in the background. And so when we feel stuck in our life, we're just like, I just feel stuck right now. I'll probably feel better next week. And then next week comes and we still feel stuck. And it's like, gosh, I'm going to wait till next year. I'm going to give this job another year. I'm going to give this opportunity another year. And then the next year comes and we come up with another excuse. And the whole thing is your mind and your body and your energy, it's all telling you what you need to know. And the more that you pay attention to it, and the more that you kind of lead with your intuition and your body, even as opposed to your mind, often better things will come. And, we're very smart, but in a lot of cases, we're our own worst enemies. And so that's one of those areas where even where I had, 5 years ago, a very successful business and 2 great business partners and a lot of awesome clients. And, I'd spent an immense amount of energy building that. I was just unhappy. And I recognized that I was no longer growing, that I was no longer being fulfilled. And even though my head and my wife and my parents and a lot of people that I trusted, my good friends, encouraged me to stick with it. And hey, just wait another year, wait another 5 years, you can kind of grunt it out. But I was so unhappy because I wasn't growing, and everything that I needed to know, my intuition was telling me. And my body was telling me, I was really out of shape. I was stressed out. My face was beet red. I was having anxiety attacks. And so even though I was a millionaire and financially independent, I was still really stuck in my life. And so the one thing that I learned from that is that, we're a lot smarter than we realize. And a lot of our intuition, we spend time repressing it. And so if you have that stirring inside of you, like I did even 5 years ago, that you got to make a change in your life, you can put it off for a little while, but why waste time? Because time is the most valuable asset that we have. And so being able to pivot, and if you feel stuck in your life, the only way to get unstuck is to do it yourself and to change it up and to mix things up without knowing what the outcome will be. And so many of us, we don't know what the outcome of any decision, and we can be rational. We have these rational brains where we try to think through everything and get all of the evidence and make the perfect decision. But, scientists tell us, and we all know, that we only use, 12% or less of our brain. And so here we are forced to make these really complicated decisions using limited amounts of our brain power. But so much of what we need to know we already have, and it's already within us. We're just not taking the time to listen to it. And, one way I've, of course, done this and gotten to know myself a little bit better and aligning that energy in myself is through meditation. But, you don't have to meditate in order to get that. You just have to pay attention to the things that you feel. And instead of just always leading, with your head and your rational mind, lead with your body and your intuition, because your intuition in a lot of cases is even more intelligent than your mind. And I think we don't even begin to understand or grasp the potential of that. It's beyond science. It's beyond reason. It's beyond, traditional philosophy. So the deeper I get into the study of the intuition and those forms of energy, the more amazed that I am. And I've been doing some writing about it and look forward to sharing that. But the takeaway is just simply that voice inside of you is right more often than it's wrong. And you can do worse than listening to that voice and getting unstuck. So those are some of the big takeaways that I've learned from the past 5 years. Relying less on my mind, getting to the edge of my own thinking, relying more on my intuition, trusting in my intuition, trusting that it'll work out, trusting that if I align with things that help me grow, that's going to lead me to a happier, more fulfilling life. And that freedom isn't about being able to do anything at any time or buy anything at any time. It's about having time to do those things that you love, but it takes some time to figure out those things that you love, truly, and building your life around those things, as I'd written about before, often requires less money than we think. So, I've had people on this podcast, Christy and Bryce, who travel the world. Not now, of course, during the pandemic, but travel the world on less money, travel the world full time on less money than it would cost for them to have a 9-to-5 job, living in Toronto. There's people I've had on the show who really have cut back to the essence of being happy and realized that it takes, a lot less money. But, we're so conditioned to follow the same path as everyone else. And that doesn't mean that the path's wrong, but it's important to figure out your own path, whether that means being an entrepreneur or not, or having a 9-to-5 or not, or pursuing your passion versus just a paycheck. But being honest with yourself and checking in with yourself. And the more that you kind of check in with yourself and the more that you spend time reflecting on that, I'm not going to say these decisions become easy, but they become a lot easier because you're naturally developing frameworks to make these decisions. So, Ray Dalio in his good book Principles talks about establishing a criteria for making decisions in your life. And that's something that you can certainly write those down on a piece of paper, or it's something that, just through lived experience, as you have more experience, it's easier for you to make some decisions because you've already experienced the outcomes, or you know yourself better and you understand what the trade-offs are going to be. And so once you have some of those systems consciously and or unconsciously in place, it makes living a little bit easier because you can filter through the opportunities and the noise from outside yourself a little bit better. And with each time, you're getting a little bit stronger. And, this stuff all just takes time. I'm not going to say that I have it all figured out by any means, but I do know now, reflecting back on the past 5 years, there's a lot more peace in my life. There's quite a bit more happiness. I do feel more alive. I feel more excited about the everyday. I feel more excited about the future. And I've also realized that it doesn't take a whole lot to make me happy. And I just really want time to do those simple things that I enjoy doing. So it's not about having all the choices in the world. It's just about having the freedom to do those things that I love, which This morning meant reading the paper with a cup of coffee, and this afternoon is going to mean reading a book in my hammock and probably taking my dog for a walk and maybe hitting the tennis ball around with my wife a little bit later. So it's a Monday in September. It is September the 14th, and it's about 1 p.m. East Coast time. Hope wherever you're listening to this, you're having a great day, and my heart goes out to all of you all across the world and all those dealing with the fires on the West Coast. And wherever you're at, just appreciate you listening and spending some time together. And just want to thank you, as always, for listening and helping to make my life so much richer and more immense. The emails and the messages I get are just so beautiful, and I'm appreciative of all of you and just to be on this journey with you. So I wish you much peace and success and happiness on this great day, and I'll see you soon.